Hello everybody, this is Niklas Huschenbeet, and today I would like to analyze the game Anish Giri against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave from the second round of Norway Chess. So let's dive right into it. Anish Giri with the white pieces playing e4, and it's been a while that I've analyzed one of Anish's games. I think I only analyzed one game by him. That was about 1.5 years ago or so. Reason is I don't analyze a lot of drawn games, but it seems Anish is mixing it up now in Norway Chess. Okay, let's get back here. C5, and Maxime is going for the Najdorf variation, and Giri goes for, I would say, the most ambitious, maybe not ambitious, but the sharpest variation there is against the Najdorf. That is bishop g5. It's my personal favorite move to play with both sides, more or less. I like it maybe a little bit better with white, because you can create some great attacking chess. You can also do a lot of preparation work in this variation. And we see the delayed poison pawn variation here. Black first plays h6, bishop h4, and now queen b6. And by inserting these two moves here, black in certain variations gets an advantage of some kind. So a few years ago, Wojtaszek, Radoslav Wojtaszek, very strong Polish player, introduced this idea, and it became popular ever since and has been a really reliable weapon for black. Now Giri played a3, which is more quiet approach to this whole variation. The crazy, really crazy stuff happens after queen d2 or queen d3, but queen d2 seems to be a critical move, and then there are these crazy variations here. Honestly, all three moves, g5, knight d5, knight d7, seem to be playable for black, but all of them just lead to long variations, and you really need to know your stuff here, but honestly for both players. So Giri didn't feel like going into this, and he went for a3. And this is maybe the only drawback for black from inserting h6 and bishop h4, because now white is able to bring this bishop back on this diagonal and play bishop f2. Now knight f5's in the air and things of that sort. Now takes c6, so black has to move the queen. Queen drops back to c7. Now queen f3, knight b7, castle, b5, g4. So it's kind of typical Sicilian stuff, right? White has castled queenside and now is pushing the pawns to create some kind of attack. h4, g5 coming, and here g5 by black is a strong move. And I actually remember that I analyzed this variation back in the day when this whole variation just became popular, and I tried to find something against it without success. So, and I looked at this line, and I just checked my analysis back then. I looked at bishop g2, which is possible, but maybe the move Giri here plays, and I'm sure he had prepared, h4, is more critical. So obviously now white is threatening to take on g5, and black takes on f4, and this was the whole point of playing g5 for black, to open up this e5 square for the knight, which gives the knight a beautiful outpost on e5. And here bishop e2, and I'm pretty certain this was still part of Giri's preparation. Queen, no, not queen takes f4, excuse me. And g5 was also possible. Now knight e5, queen takes f4, knight fg4, and now bishop e2. Here white gives up the dark squared bishop, but on the other hand is maybe a little bit quicker with creating play on the king side. Right now, black cannot take the pawn here on g5, really, because now black is kind of forced to exchange rooks. If he doesn't, then there's this typical Sicilian sacrifice and opening up the black position. This is very strong here. So maybe instead black would play rook f8 here. And honestly, I'm not sure, because this knight is just so strong that I don't think personally that black is in any trouble here. It would surprise me. So bishop e2 is preparing g5 and just delaying it for now. And here Vacher played rook g8, which I think surprised Giri. He probably had not looked at this move. The first move really that comes to mind is knight e5 anyway, right? Because after all, this is the square the knight wants to go to. Now queen takes f4, and here, if black just simply plays bishop b7, well, king b1, and at some point white will play g5, and I guess black's main problem is what to do with his king, after all. Because the king will only be safe in the center for so long. Or rather, it will always be a target if the king stays in the center, but if you castle queenside, then also, well, might not be completely safe. There's another variation here if black plays knight e takes g4, making use of some tactics here, but it seems that black is paying a certain price here, particularly weakening these light squares on f5 and d5, and here white can play knight d5, kind of a counterattack. Knight takes d5, and now moving the queen, now the bishop is not attacked on g4 anymore. And knight f4, now simply king b1. And it seems white has very decent compensation here, like I said, because he has access to these squares. But let's look at the game. Rook g8, and here Giri made a mistake. He mirrored black's move by playing rook dg1, but it's simply too slow. And also moving this rook away from a decent square already, the rook is keeping an eye on the center here, seems unnatural. Of course, that's easy for me to say with hindsight, but the critical move in this position was to go for it, go g5, and actually this looks really, really dangerous for black here. So let's dive into some variations. We'll see so many fun variations here. I'm kind of thrilled. So takes, now black has pretty much one option, knight e5. If black takes on g5, then it's rook h8 check. Knight g8 is refuted pretty much immediately because of bishop h4, and this is not looking good for black. And after rook g8, this rook takes g8, knight takes, and now queen g2 is a very subtle move. And the point is that after knight gf6, now there's e5. And usually after e5, there's always this typical response to counterattack bishop b7. But because the queen has retreated to g2, white can react to the counterattack with a counterattack of his own, playing bishop f3, hitting the bishop on b7. And now black cannot keep it all together and has to give up a piece here, probably with d5. But this just leaves white in a very good spot here. So instead, in this position, let's look at knight e5. Queen takes f4, now knight fd7. And here white has a beautiful sacrifice. It is a classic Sicilian sacrifice, knight takes e6, but it is still very surprising to me that it works here so well. F takes e6 and just rook h7. Obviously, for a human to calculate these lines is very difficult, particularly because you might be a little bit afraid of dropping your queen here, but indeed white has a reaction here with bishop h5 check, followed by bishop h4 counterpin, and not losing the queen obviously, but winning rather himself. And knight f7 is an interesting try, point being that after bishop takes f7 is king f8, and now indeed black will win the queen. White is still better here, but instead of rook takes f7, bishop takes f7, there's rook takes f7 actually, and white will cause a lot of trouble here with the two bishops and is winning. So instead of taking on g5, black should play king d8, but white simply plays bishop h5, and it is kind of surprising, but the main trump here for white is obviously the active rook on the 7th rank and this pawn, which will be pushed. So for example, bishop b7, g6 simply, and g7, rook h8 might be coming, and things along these lines. And also there's this idea to exchange the defender of black by playing bishop h4. Maybe rook f8 is the best try here, but on queen g3 once again, g7, g6, g7 is coming, and white is in pretty good shape. So that was a critical move, g5, because after rook g1, black is able to take action first, and he does so by playing d5. Very strong move by Vachier-Lagrave, and typical. Actually, it is this principle. If your opponent is playing on the sides of the board, the queen side or the king side, then react by playing in the center. And this is exactly what black does here, opening up the center and creating play himself suddenly. E takes d5, and now knight e5. There was another good move here, bishop b7, which also makes a lot of sense to develop this bishop. And obviously there are all kinds of threats along the long diagonal. If knight c6, then simply cool as a cucumber, bishop f8 retreating. The knight on c6 is looking into emptiness. This was probably a not so accurate German translation, but the knight is pretty pointless on c6, not doing much, and black will just follow up by taking on d5 next. For example, queen d3, knight takes c5, knight takes d5, and queen takes c6, and black is doing excellent. Instead, black played knight e5, which, like I said, is also very good. Point is that now queen takes f4 is not possible because of knight d3, picking up the loose queen on f4. So white had to play queen h3, and now black simply takes back. And we see already didn't turn out well for white. Black has won a pawn, first of all. And second of all, the main idea of white to create play, to play g5, is prevented. The bishop is pinning the pawn. And white is struggling already to come up with sensible moves. What to do? Giri played rook e1, which is not the best move. Like I said, it's already difficult. Bishop f3 might have been the best shot. Here again we can look at some crazy lines that are really not easy to find over the board. b4, and now knight takes d5, and now there's knight d3 check. This is a common motive we see over and over in this game actually, king b1. Now obviously black has to react to the threat to his queen, so he takes on d5. Now white has to take one of the two knights. Let's start with bishop takes d5, and knight takes f2, forking queen and rook. White reacts to playing queen b3, creating another threat here. And here black best reacts by simply playing king f8. And after bishop takes a8, is knight takes h1 simply. And the material is equal, but it's black to move, takes on a3, and also this pawn on g4 might be loose, the king might be a little bit weak. Well, same can be said about the black king, but one trump black has here is the bishop pair as well. So this is fairly good for black. What about taking the other knight? C takes d3. That's a better try. But here very strong, giving up the knight on d5, similar b takes a3, and it turns out that black has a strong attack here. And actually it's not surprising, right? Because all of the main forces of the white are right on the other side of the board. But I should do it like this. Bishop b3, and then rook takes b3, knight takes b3, and queen b7. And the knight cannot move because of checkmate, and after d4, f3 just works out beautifully for black. I love these variations, cutting off the queen from protecting the knight. Okay, so you can see I'm going quite a lot of depth here, but it's just showing you what's possible. Another move better than rook e1, but also kind of strange, is queen f1. We're trying to get out of this pin, but here black is also this move now suddenly, because the knight is not protected anymore, threatening. Queen takes c3, king b1. Now can we just collect this pawn on g4 as well. In either case, it is not easy for white. So rook e1, obviously hoping to create some kind of play on the e-file. Black reacts by simply playing the king out of the e-file, which makes a lot of sense. There was a more direct approach by the computer, h5, to exploit this pin. And if black can take on g4 without any repercussions, then white is of course completely lost. So knight f5 here is my guess what Giri want to play, but it seems that black can still just take with the rook. What is pretty interesting here is the move bishop d4, threatening to take on e5. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. If bishop takes f5, then there's bishop takes e5. Let's say the queen moves, and then bishop takes f6. And there's just, once again, a lot of craziness here. Queen c6, and I'm assuming that... Okay, who knows what's going on? I'm not going on here. Now there's a checkmate threat, and if I take on e7 and play queen b3, doesn't look that good for white either. After something like bishop e6. Yeah, a lot of stuff happening here. Yeah, this might still continue with queen b4. It's all craziness, but what I want to show actually in this position, instead of bishop takes f5, black can play rook g3. Once again, making use of a pin on this diagonal. Queen moves, and now rook takes c3. The rook is going a little bit berserk on the third rank. And if white takes on c3, there's a sweet little move, I would say knight d3 again. Point is that now after c takes d3, black can just take on f5, and this bishop is pinned, so the bishop cannot take on f6, and black has two minor pieces against the rook, which gives him the advantage. Alternatively, if knight takes e7, then black continues with the crazy rook to e3. Really nice, I think. Bishop takes e3, or, well, if rook takes e3, then just f takes e3, and black is up a piece. And here, there's again this motive. Like I said, we'll see it over and over again. Knight d3, picking up this one, and picking up this one, and black's also up a piece, but white still has some chances. Okay, let's return once again to the game. King f8 was played, and now knight f5. Yeah, maybe bishop f3 instead, but like I said, it's all already very difficult. This also looks really good for black. But knight f5, now black just takes. Now black has a lot of attractive options here. Bishop c5 is a good move. What Bashir played. Another move is b4. And another move, just killing white immediately. His bishop takes a3, just going all in here with rook g3 is just gorgeous, but once again really difficult to find for a human. Also in such a position not necessary to play if there are really good alternatives like what Vacher played, bishop c5. But this works, and I want to show you this real quick. Queen takes c3, this was the idea of rook g3, an interference move. So the white queen is not defending the knight on c3 anymore. And now there's a threat of queen a1 and knight e4 checkmate. So if the bishop was to retreat here, this is just checkmate right away. So best shot, well, not really. Okay, if white plays king b1 and black just takes on g3, knight e4 is coming, and this is all over. And if white takes on f4, we'll see a nice king hunt here. Check, 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 check. A lot of checks. And now check. And now just queen takes f4, and white cannot deal with the threats here. Queen e5 and so on. For example, rook takes e4, giving up more pieces, or white doesn't take, it doesn't matter. In the end, it all leads to a checkmate, and here it is. That was just another possible variation that didn't happen. Bishop c5, like I said, good enough. Just exchanging this bishop. Now queen f1. Yeah, maybe bishop takes c5, queen takes c5, queen f1, but once again, this is all pretty bad for white. Just passive, and black is controlling the board more or less. So, it's not looking good. Instead, Giri played queen f1 right away, and then also just d4 and knight e4. The knight's coming into action. White is all passive, no counterplay, nothing white can do really. Bishop f3. So if black was to take on f3 with the knight, and rook takes e4 would alleviate some trouble for white, but instead just knight takes f2, taking the other bishop. And now bishop takes a8. If queen takes f2, there's d3, which is a huge problem because it creates all kinds of threats here against the white king and queen. So if I was to move the queen here, then it's just bishop e3 followed by queen takes c2 checkmate already. And if I keep an eye on this pawn on c2, then it's just knight takes f3. So instead, Giri took on a8, but now there's knight ed3 check, another nice strike by Vacher-Lagrave. King d2 is forced because after c takes d3, there's bishop takes a3 check, king d2 and bishop b4 check, and well, best white can do is knight c3 here, but we don't have to look at this anymore. Black is completely crushing. But alternatively, if king e2 here to run, the run won't last long. f3 check. It's kind of nice how all the black pieces are involved here in some way or the other. And it's checkmate. King takes f3 is queen g3 and queen e3, and bishop takes f3 is just queen c2 and queen takes d2 checkmate. So Giri played king d2, but now simply knight takes e1, queen takes f2. If white takes the other knight, obviously this rook is still hanging, then white is also down material additionally to his bad position. But here after queen takes f2, there's d3, and this is simply the final final move to end things, really. Giri took on e1. Yeah, there's not much to do anyway. Took on e1 and now bishop e3. And white resigned because checkmate is coming soon. If the king moves, obviously there's checkmate immediately. So best thing white could do was give up the queen, but here also this won't last long anymore. Quite a strong game by Vasyl Graf, and this is kind of a model game of how Knight of players like their games to go, really. Just out of the opening, developing an attack and just crushing the other side. Obviously it doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it was a lot of fun, I'm pretty sure, for Maxime. So really where it all went wrong, I think, I didn't look at the clock situation, but it seemed that Giri was well prepared as always, and he kind of caught Maxime a little bit in the opening because he made this inaccuracy rook g8, but then Giri didn't follow up with the strongest reply, and actually not only didn't he follow with the best reply, but through rook dg1, then Maxime was able to immediately take the initiative, and from there it was all black, really, and Giri could never come back into the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis, and I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.